On Tuesday, the 3rd of August, here at ISKCON Dublin. As ever, we'll just start with chanting Jai Radha Madhava. Jai Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopika Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopika Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajjanandana Yashodanandana Vrajjanandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jayarat Amad Ava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopika Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopika Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajjanandana Yashodanandana Vrajjanandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jayarat Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayarat Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. A reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1. Canto 1, and it's obviously chapter 14. I shouldn't say obviously because it's the last verse today of chapter 14. Chapter 14, the disappearance of Lord Krishna, and it is text 44. Kiñcit prestata menata virayenatma bandhuna sunyosmi rahito nityam manyase tenyatanaruk. Kiñcit prestata menata virayenatma bandhuna sunyosmi rahito nityam manyase tenyatanaruk. Kiñcit prestata menata virayenatma bandhuna sunyosmi rahito nityam manyase tenyatanaruk. Kiñcit prestata menata virayenatma bandhuna sunyosmi rahito nityam manyase tenyatanaruk. Kiñcit prestata menata virayenatma bandhuna sunyosmi rahito nityam manyase tenyatanaruk. Kiñcit, whether, prestata mena, unto the most dear one, ata, my brother Arjuna, vidayena, most intimate, Atma-bandhuna, own friend, Lord Krishna. Sunya, void. Asmi, I am. Rahita, having lost. Nijam, for all time. Manyase, you think. Te, your. Anyata, otherwise. Na, never. Ruk, mental distress. Translation. Or is it that you are feeling empty for all time because you might have lost your most intimate friend, Lord Krishna? O my brother Arjuna, I can think of no other reason for your becoming so dejected. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All the inquisitiveness of Maharaj Yudhishthir about the world's situation was already conjectured by Maharaj Yudhishthir on the basis of Lord Krishna's disappearance from the vision of the world. And this was now disclosed by him because of the acute dejection of Arjuna, which could not have been possible otherwise. So even though he was doubtful about it, he was obliged to inquire frankly from Arjuna on the basis of Sri Narada's indication. Translation again. Or is it that you are feeling empty for all time because you might have lost your most intimate friend, Lord Krishna? Oh, my brother Arjuna, I can think of no other reason for your becoming so dejected. Om Ajana Timandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umilitam Iyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayarupagadamayam Dadati Swabadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The last verse in this particular chapter. And this particular chapter, the title and substance of, is in many ways, as is described in today's verse actually, but in many ways it's a very difficult topic for devotees, the disappearance of Lord Krishna. Not least because devotees do not want Krishna to disappear, that's for sure. If you're fortunate to have Krishna's association, you certainly would not want him to disappear. And two, of course, because Krishna actually, in the ultimate issue, does not disappear. But of course, what we're talking about here is Krishna's vapu, or physical. Nothing about Krishna's physical, but his appearance in this on earth here, 5,000 years ago, in this most most precious of all incarnations, because it's not an incarnation as such, it's Krishna himself appearing like that in his full glorious form, Shyamasundar form. So yeah, the title of the chapter itself is in that sense challenging. And it's interesting reading the Sanskrit, the word hridayena is translated as most intimate. And of course, hriday is the word for heart in Sanskrit. And affairs of the heart are the most intimate type of affairs. So it's been described here as the most intimate because of the intimate relationship between Arjuna and Lord Krishna. And then Nityam, for all time or eternal, that Is it that you're feeling empty for all time, for eternality, because you might have lost your most intimate friend, Hridaya, Lord Krishna? Oh my brother, I can see no other reason for you becoming so dejected. So Arjuna, in the purport, Prabhupada uses the word, the acute dejection of Arjuna. So Arjuna, in that sense here now, as is with Maharaj Yudhisthira, really suffering, really struggling, because, you know, externally, if you like, Lord Krishna has disappeared, and they're just bereft, totally bereft. We all know. We all know the emotions when we lose somebody that we love. Actually, the emotion of losing someone we love, and the kind of ecstasy when we gain somebody. So when a newborn baby is born, you know, that's a joyous occasion because somebody has been welcomed into the family, and their life is just starting. But at the other end of the scale, when someone is departing, someone that you've known for many, many years, many decades, and they're departing, then that's actually very painful. And it's just the nature of the material world, of course, sukha dukkha, happiness and distress, that those different elements are there. It's interesting, actually, of course it hasn't been happening so much of late, but it's interesting that if you go to an airport, as I say, not happening so much of late because of the world situation, as is described here today, the world situation 5,000 years ago, more than 5,000 years ago now. So the world situation today is the whole COVID thing. So, you know, travel and air travel, airports hasn't been as prominent as it normally would be. But when you do go to an airport, it's so interesting to see when in the departure lounge, when people are leaving, you'll often see tears of sadness because a loved one is departing. But then if you go to the arrival lounge, you'll see tears again, but usually they're tears of joy because loved ones are coming back and they're meeting people for the first time, maybe in a long time. So it's similar here in the world. Actually, the airport, it's interesting, the airport analogy can be used also about our departure from this world, that we never know when it's going to happen. And likewise, if you go to depart on an airplane, you know, your flight is listed on the board, but you don't know what gate it is, you don't know what time it's leaving, etc. So that part of it's kind of unknown. Anyway, that analogy can be used, actually. It's an interesting one. So here, in terms of happiness and distress, as it relates to departing this world and arriving back into this world, that analogy is quite a good one. So these are all affairs of the heart, and that's ultimately the relationship that we all have with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's a loving relationship, and it's an affair of the heart. Of course, it's different than the affairs of the heart in the material world, because they're always, to varying degrees, contaminated. You know, sounds like a medical word, but they're always affected by some level of motivation, material motivation. And as we've said many times, Srila Prabhupada tells us that the best example of spiritual love, or a spiritual affair of the heart in the material world, the closest we have, or the best example of that, would be the love that a mother has for her child, because it's virtually unmotivated. It's you know, the mother will do literally anything for her child. So that's the difference between relationships in the material world and the spiritual world. In the material world, there's always some level of motivation or agenda involved, whereas in the spiritual world, it's completely free from that. It's unmotivated and it is uninterrupted. It's just a constant flow of pure love. So because of that, and the uniqueness of it, and the very special nature of it, we have to become qualified. If we have material desire, we cannot benefit from, or we cannot enter into the ecstasy and the specialness of those loving relationships that are free from all motivations. So first we have to work on ourselves and get free from those different motivations, etc. And then we can enter into these incredibly special relationships. And when I was reading today's verse earlier, I was thinking of a verse in the Krishna Karnamrita, which was a book actually that Lord Chaitanya discovered, if you like, or unearthed when he was on his tour of South India. He also unearthed the Brahma Samhita on his tour of South India. Yes, so this book, very special book, the Krishna Karnamrita, and there's one verse in it that starts with Mayi Prashadam Madhurai, I think it's Madurai, Mayi Prashadam Madurai. I see, it slips my mind now, but Mayi Prashadam Madurai, Katakser, I think is the word. I won't try to stumble through the rest of the verse, but the verse is basically saying, O Lord, addressing Lord Krishna, please show me your mercy by casting upon me your charming sidelong glances, moving to the accompaniment of your flute song. So Krishna playing his flute in the spiritual world. If I have your blessings, so again addressing Lord Krishna, what are the use of others' blessings? If I have your blessings, what are the use of other blessings? And if I'm without your blessings, what are the use of other blessings? So a kind of beautiful verse. And I guess we could kind of consider Arjuna's situation today. In Ireland they have a thing called a lament, you know, and generally it's associated with verse or poetry and also music. You know, it's a lament, an Irish lament, and it's a sorrowful song. They're sorrowful songs reflecting on the loss of a loved one, as we've been discussing. So that's kind of the mood here of Arjuna. And this verse from the Krishna Karnamrita is, you know, it's reflecting that, you know, if I have Krishna's blessings, I'm in need of no other blessings. And if I don't have Krishna's blessings, then I don't want any other blessings, because, you know, the blessings of Krishna are kind of the most important and most precious, most special blessings that any of us can ever have. So yeah, Arjuna is very much, and Yudhishthira of course, they're both suffering greatly as a result of Krishna's departure. This principle of departure or losing Krishna, though, it's also, from a devotee's perspective, and Prabhupada talks about it an awful lot actually in all of his writings, it's also a way that we can increase our attachment for and our love for Krishna. If you have something that's so precious to you, so loving to you, and it disappears from your sight, then your kind of natural response is you want to bring it back into your sight. And the longer that it's missing from your vision, and the longer that apparent separation or departure is taking place, the more intense your desire is for it to return. And this is the principle of Vipralamba, or Vipralamba Seva, the service in separation. And the basic principle is that there can be no union, and there can certainly, going back to the airport example again, people coming back, maybe they've gone to Australia for 10 years and, you know, they have been away from their family for that time, then they come back. So that ecstasy that those people feel at the airport when that union is taking place, or reunion I should say, is taking place, it can only actually take place, it can only happen if there's been separation. So this principle of separation, and in the context of spiritual life, service in separation, is the real basis, the real foundation, and the real platform from which we can actually experience the ecstasy of Krishna's personal association. And that happens so much with devotees. And as I say, Prabhupada talks about it in many places. So I'm just going to read a couple because they're just such perfect examples. This first one involves Queen Kunti. And, well, let me just read. So Prabhupada writes, Krishna cannot be absent from a devotee when the devotee is intensely absorbed in thought of Krishna. So Krishna cannot be absent. Of course, there's different flavors in relationships, you know. So Krishna being absent, as Arjuna is experiencing now, is a real flavor, and it's real. But at the same time, in the absolute sense, Krishna's never absent if we're thinking about Krishna, and that's the incredible thing about Krishna, that by, for instance, uttering his holy name, which is the great benediction of this yuga. Otherwise, this yuga is, as we've discussed many times, hasn't got much going for it. I laugh because I laugh, and I shouldn't laugh really, you know, but I laugh out of exasperation, I think would be the word, you know. And the reason I laugh is that, you know, Krishna's holy name descending in this age of Kali is an incredible benediction, and it's described again in Shastra as being, you know, nothing can surpass it. It's such an incredible benediction that Krishna has appeared in this holy name. But then, as I say, you know, aside from that, this age has really very little, if anything, going for it. And I laugh because practically everybody, and ourselves included as devotees striving to become ever more advanced in Krishna consciousness, we also suffer this or experience this or attempt this to a different degree, a different level maybe, but still, it's not that we're free from it. But essentially everybody in the material world, to obviously a much larger degree than devotees who are trying to advance in spiritual life, they're trying to be happy. In this world, they're trying to be happy. And they're trying to be happy because they think it's possible. Now, of course, it's also, as we've discussed many times, Anandamaya Bhyasat, we are eternally pleasure-seeking living entities. That's what we are. We're eternally pleasure-seeking. So the desire to seek pleasure, the desire to be happy, is completely 100% bang on. It's completely correct. But it's just we've got to get the right atmosphere, the right circumstances, the right location, the right place, the right, the right place where we can achieve that happiness. And that is just such a simple principle, because we're eternal, nitya, as is mentioned in this verse here. We're eternal. We are full of bliss. As spiritual beings, we are full of bliss. We are not even affected one scintilla by misery or unhappiness. Doesn't exist on the spiritual platform, and ultimately does not exist for us as spiritual beings. It only exists when we come to this atmosphere, and then still the soul is pure and in one sense is unaffected. But because our consciousness gets wrapped up in the modes of nature and the temporary nature and the suffering nature of the material world, we suffer, or at least we're experiencing suffering. We think we are suffering like that. So that's why I laugh, because it's just, in one sense, it's so obvious. We're eternal. We're full of bliss. We're full of knowledge. That's us. And that's exactly what the spiritual world is. It's eternal. It's full of bliss. It's full of knowledge. From a material point of view, we're temporary. Here we are, you know, the material body, you know, with the white hair. It's temporary. It's coming to an end. Once I was that little baby that was, you know, hopefully celebrated coming into the world by my family. Maybe I can't remember. Maybe they didn't. But, you know, once I was that little baby, now, you know, old man. So it's temporary. This material body is temporary. Everything related to this material world is temporary. It's full of ignorance. Yes, we know some things, but there's so much we don't know. all the time, and I always talk about it, scientists, you know, telling us about the origins of the universe, and then they find some fossil somewhere that doesn't fit in with their previous theory, and everything has to be adjusted. So yes, we know some things, but we don't know everything. We're always searching out things and trying to find. This pandemic came along, suddenly, you know, they had no cure for it, no solution for it, so they have to go searching for it like that. So yes, we have some knowledge, but there's so much we don't know. And then bliss, that the spiritual world, us as spirit souls, full of bliss. But this material world that people are trying to find happiness in, there is so much suffering. Just so much suffering taking place all the time. All the time. You just have to switch on the news, actually. On your television, which is another subject, which I won't get into, or your radio, or your newspaper, or your internet, or whatever it is. You just have to look at it. And everything, practically speaking, you know, maybe I should even go on the internet now and go on, I don't know, BBC or something. You will see that every headline, every news article has some element of suffering to it. Oh, there's been an earthquake here, a tsunami here. Oh, COVID is exploding over here. You know, whatever it might be. You know, someone's murdered somebody, etc., etc. Whatever it might be, there is so much misery. So much misery. Vṛddha-bālakān, from the highest planet, the very highest planet in the material world, down to the very lowest planet. All are places of suffering. Why? Because repeated birth and death takes place in this material realm like that. So it is impossible to be happy. We're eternal, it's temporary. We're full of bliss, there's so much suffering here. We're full of knowledge, there's so much ignorance here. We cannot be happy in the material world, it's just impossible. By the way, just to let you know, I'm really preaching to myself here. I'm talking to myself. We cannot be happy, so why bother trying? Why bother trying to be happy when it's just not achievable? There are so many things in the material world that are very hard to achieve. Currently the Olympic Games is on. Now, you know, there's like nearly 8 billion people, human beings living on the planet. You know, so I don't know how many gold medals in total they have in the Olympics, but let's say they have, I don't know, 500. Let's say they have 500 gold medals can be won. 500 as a fraction of 8 billion. I mean, what's that? It's 0.00000, whatever it is, you know. So only 500 people in total out of 8 billion can win a gold medal, but it's still achievable. It's still achievable. However unlikely it is, however hard it is to achieve, it's still achievable. But happiness in the material world is not achievable. You don't even have that tiny fraction of a chance. It just is not achievable. So why do we try? Why do we try? And that's why it's very sad, you know. Did I mention, was it last week I mentioned? I don't know, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk one time, and he's walking past a golf course, and he sees, you know, people on the golf course playing golf. And he apparently shed a tear when he saw them. Because of that reason. They're out there, they're trying to enjoy. And of course, you know, walking a golf course, you know, on a nice summer's morning is quite a nice way to try to be happy in the material world. It's still not achievable, but it's kind of, you know, it's relatively pleasant like that. But Prabhupada apparently shed a tear, because he could just see these people want to be happy, but they have no clue how to be happy. And that's why it's so exasperating, and that's why I'm laughing a little bit, that, you know, millions of people today, billions of people today, are going to seek to try to be happy. And it's just a fool's game, because it cannot be achieved. So anyway, I'll just read this. Krishna cannot be absent from a devotee when the devotee is intensely absorbed in thought of Krishna, or Krishna thought. Here, Kunti Devi is very much anxious, thinking that Krishna will be absent. But the actual effect of Krishna's physical absence is that he becomes more intensely present within the mind of a devotee. So that's the idea. If our attachment to Krishna is sufficiently strong, and, you know, should we have some Vapu association of Krishna, but then Krishna leaves, or we have to leave, whatever the case may be. That if our attachment is strong, then we will be thinking of Krishna. That's what we will do. We will just constantly be thinking of Krishna. And that thought of Krishna is non-different than him. Just like in his holy name, it's non-different. Krishna's absolute. You know, it's not all separated parts or separated situations. No, Krishna's absolute. So he's present in his name. When we think of Krishna, he's immediately there. Krishna's in our heart, of course, all of those things. So Krishna's physical absence is that he becomes more intensely present within the mind of a devotee. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by the example of his actual life, taught the principle of Vipralambha Seva that we were talking about, service in separation from the physical Vapu form, if you like, of Krishna. Service of Krishna in separation. Tears would come from his eyes like torrents of rain. Can you imagine torrents of rain streaming from your eyes? For he would feel everything to be vacant for want of Krishna. So everything is vacant for Lord Chaitanya for want of Krishna. Of course, Lord Chaitanya is very special because he's actually Krishna himself, but he's coming in the mood of a devotee. So everything is vacant for want of Krishna, but that want, if you have that want, you will think of Krishna, you'll meditate on Krishna, you'll chant Krishna's holy name, you'll, look at the form of Krishna, picture his deity form, whatever it may be. So the very want, which is like everything is vacant, you've got this massive vacuum in your life, but that very desire is an ecstasy in and of itself, and you'll have Krishna present because of that meditation. And then, of course, Kunti Devi is famous for the verse Vipadas and Tutas Shasvat, and what she's saying to Lord Krishna is that, dear Lord Krishna, please let these calamities, these difficulties, these challenges, and of course Queen Kunti and the Pandavas have so many challenges and difficulties in their life, please let them come again and again and again and again and again. For it is only, it's only with those calamities, with those difficulties, with those challenges, that I remember you. And that again reflects the way the material world is. If things look good in the material world, the sun is shining, I've got money in my pocket, my relationships are in a good place and all of that kind of thing, then the tendency is, life's great, we forget. But then, as Prabhupada, the example Prabhupada gave was during war, and he mentioned the World War II. During World War II, whether you were in, Hindu India or Christian countries in the West or Islamic countries, whatever it may have been, the temples, the mosques, the churches, they were full because bombs were dropping from the sky. People were fearful. They would go and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Queen Kunti, she's saying here, let calamities, let difficulties, let them rain down on me. Because when the difficulties and challenges are raining down on me, then I think of you and I try to achieve your lotus feet. Okay, I'll stop there. Could go on, but I know that you're all very busy, shouldn't speak for too long. So I'll stop there, just with that meditation. Two things really. As much as our mind and our senses may force us to think that we can be happy in the material world, always hold on to the thought that it is impossible. No matter how perfect the circumstances are, it is impossible. And the second thing is that try to develop that mood of the only important thing in life is Krishna's blessings, and of course Krishna's indirect blessings through his devotees, but in the context of what we're talking today, Krishna's blessings, they are the most important thing. And yes, we cannot remember and may never have had personal physical association, if you like, with Lord Krishna, but let's try to cultivate remembering Krishna. Manmana bhava mad bhakto, that always remember me. That's Krishna's advice to achieve perfection, always remember him. So we're not going to be able to do that immediately. But every time that we're not thinking of Krishna, that we're thinking of something else, as soon as we remember that we're not thinking of Krishna, then try to think of Krishna. Think of some verse, look at a picture of Krishna, look at the deity form of Krishna, chant Krishna's holy name, of course, like that. And then we'll slip again, and our mind will wander, etc. But then when we remember we've slipped and we remember our mind has wandered, then let's pull it back and think of Krishna again. And if we just get into a mood of trying to do that, then that practice eventually will make us perfect. And there will come a time, at some point, where we will never stop thinking of Krishna. Our thoughts of Krishna will be, as we say, 24/7. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna, and all glories to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.